Hello everyone and welcome back to the YouTube channel of the podcast. The conversation today is with a widely celebrated guest whose activism and advocacy on public health issues and specifically tuberculosis advocacy has garnered widespread support and recognition not just at the national level but at a global level. Most recently, Nandita, the guest on our podcast today, won the patent opposition for an anti-DP drug, bedaquiline, against Johnson & Johnson, a pharmaceutical giant. In this episode today, she talks about her journey with dealing with tuberculosis and the many hardships that she has had to endure during the process of becoming the person that she is today. A small caveat, this episode was shot a long time back, but due to some technical glitches and personal limitations, it could not be shot entirely in video format. So this particular episode is partly in video form and partly in audio form. So please do bear. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. And if you like what we share on the podcast, on this channel, on YouTube, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more such content. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Speak Synergy, a podcast where we bring to you conversations with individuals who have exhibited immense strength and resilience through some of the most trying times in their lives. Today we have with us a very celebrated guest whose activism on tuberculosis care and treatment has gotten her featured across multiple national and international forums. Hi Nandita, thank you so much for taking the time out of your extremely packed schedule. I'm sure the conversation that will entail today will prove to be a silver lining to anyone who feels they've reached the nadir in their life. While Nandita needs absolutely no introduction, for the sake of protocol, I will try capturing the multifaceted and resilient being that she is. Nandita is a two-time tuberculosis survivor and is the voice of tuberculosis patients at varied national and international forums. She is currently a data journalist with The Mint and an alumni of the University of Oxford's Blavatnik School of Government, where she pursued the Masters in Public Policy on the Schevening Weidenfeld Hoffmann Trust Scholarship. What makes me invite her on the podcast is to get to know the real challenges that Nandita faced and to capture her journey while she circumvented through it all. During one of her episodes of battling with tuberculosis, the side effect of a TB-related injection led to a complete hearing loss. With a cochlear implant and a heartening battle with the life-threatening infection, Nandita's passion for dance and public speaking kept her afloat. She was invited to address the 2018 United Nations General Assembly at the UN headquarters in New York, representing TB survivors globally. She has also spoken at the UN World Conference on Lung Health and was the youngest member of the WHO Civil Society Task Force on Tuberculosis. Nandita has been featured on a plethora of national news organizations, including The Hindu, Times of India, Mirror Now, Times Now, Hindustan Times, as also on international media including The Lancet, National Public Radio, BBC, Reuters, HuffPost Canada, Deutsche Welle, and others. She is a recipient of multiple awards including the Cavan Care Ability, Mastery Award, Voices for Diagnosis Prize by Find, the ICICI Advantage Women Award, and Rotary India's Vocational Excellence Award, among many others. One of her most recent fiats was that her portrait was inaugurated at the University of Oxford's Keble College as a mark of her all-encompassing personality that refuses to submit to grave adversities. Welcome again to the Speak Synergy podcast, Nandita. It is such an honor to speak to you and have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Very nice to talk to you.
All right, Nandita. So, if I may start off by asking you, if you can take us through the journey of when you were first diagnosed with tuberculosis and how long have you been battling with this infection? How old were you?
So I was first diagnosed with TB when I was 17 years old. This was around 2-3 months before I turned 18. This was in 2000 and this was in 2007. And then at that point of time, I was like put on these extensive medications and things like that. So naturally, like there were these medications, etc., that I had to take for a couple of months. And then it was I took these medications for almost 15 months. And then back then the number of medications were much more, so I had to take medications, I think almost 10 or 15 pills every day. And like back then, the number of medications given for TB was really high. And then so I had to take them. And then after that, I was obviously was declared cured. And the doctor gave me the go ahead. He said that I'm doing fine. And and that after that I went on to pursue my master's in New Delhi. I had studied at the Indian Institute of Mass Communications, where I had pursued a postgraduate diploma in radio and television journalism. And after that I did a very short work stint for like less than a year in Delhi. And then after that is when I was re-diagnosed with the illness for the second time. And this was in 2013. And this time around, I think things really went downhill. So even after the first time, like I said, I got it in 2007, and then I finished my treatment in 2009. It was long. It was for 15 months, but it was bearable. But it was like, I was in college, so I was a very, I was 17, 18 years old. So it was something very new for me, to go through something like this at a young age. So though the disease as such was not big, but obviously, the mental impact back then was strong, because I became, this very socially very reclusive person. I was became my confidence levels went really low. I was not very comfortable talking with my classmates, because I would constantly feel like very low about myself. And then that happened. But then the second time around was when things went really bad. And then I remember when I was re-diagnosed with it in 2013 May. It's like at the clinic when I was told that I was with my mother. And then when the doctor just told me that, okay, you have got it back. So I remember going, and then the doctor also said that you may need to undergo surgery in say 1 or 2 months time. If the medicine will put your medications, if it does not respond, then you will have to undergo a surgery to remove that infected portion of the intestine. And that was like a huge shock for me, like at 23, 24, hospital is the last place you want to see. And so so I remember coming down. It was just me and my mother. We came down, and I think for the first time both of us just broke down below the clinic, and we just started like sobbing literally that evening or night. It was around 8 o'clock or something. I remember 7:38 or something. Both of us were just crying. I came home, and I sort of just shut myself in a room for like half an hour or something. I so that I just wanted like my time to gain composure. But then the doctor back then had said that that look, you only have to undergo the surgery, and it will be just a matter of 1 or 2 months. The whole thing will last for a month. As in, you undergo surgery, you will be in the hospital for 10 days, and then you'll be discharged. And then after that, you have to rest for a month or two, 2 months of rest, and then you can resume your normal life. But nothing of that sort ever happens. So I went from what was supposed to be like, one surgery affair went on to like happen into 6 surgeries. I was operated on my stomach almost on 6 times. And then multiple, and most of these surgeries after the first one happened on an emergency basis, because the bacteria was just growing. The surgery could not bring the tuberculosis bacteria under control. And so before I proceed, so I had my TB in the stomach. So generally people get in the lungs, but in my case, it was in the stomach.
Hmm.
But so that is why I was operated on my stomach these many times, because that is where the TB was there. And then naturally 6 rounds, I was in the hospital for almost 90 days, that is like 3 months. And then it was in at that point of time, no one, I was not allowed to, like, it was just my mother. I was not allowed to meet anyone, had to be in isolation. And even after that, even after the hospitalization, happened, and I was out after that, I was pretty much like bedridden after that for like several months after that. And then it was during this phase that this injection that I was given in for treating this disease. And as I was given this injection for almost like 100 or 110 days. And this, like, injection is given in your butt as part of your treatment. And then after the course of the injection got over, after that is when I was diagnosed with the complete hearing loss from both my ears. So this happened because of the injection, because we were not told about this side effect beforehand, because of this, that this injection can cause this kind of hearing loss. So we were not informed about it. So this naturally it was a huge like a huge shocker for me after that, because you are not able to communicate very basic things, like you cannot communicate with your parents, you cannot communicate with anyone, you're in like in a silent world. And that went on for like 2013 until like 2000, almost till 2019. So I had my cochlear implants after like 6 years. So 2018 or 2018 and December is when I had my cochlear implants done. So like 6, 7 years of like pin drop silence. All through this, I was not working. I was out of the job market for almost 4 years. So, that really like shattered my confidence, because, like I was just starting my career back then. And then all of a sudden this just happens. And then, like my career, professional ambitions have completely come to a standstill. My professional ambitions are nowhere. And most of us, we are all very ambitious people, like we have certain aims for us, we have certain dreams that we want to do this, we want to do that, but nothing of all of that just went off. So it was after that time that that after that I started working, and then things started looking up for all of us.
You're saying all of this, but there's so many emotions behind everything that you have experienced. And
Yeah.
so, can you take us back through to the time when you first battled with tuberculosis at the age of 17? You mentioned that you had cut yourself off from your batchmates or your classmates. What was that like? How did you deal with eventually coming out and dealing with it mentally?
Yeah,
How was that?
so because the reason was that I used to feel very low about myself. I used to feel that why this happened with me. And I used to always put myself against the other classmates, and I would feel like, wow, their lives are like so much better. They are able to go out, they are able to hang out with friends, they are able to go for late night outs, etc. But I could not do any of that, because I had to like take my medications. These medications come with side effects, like you undergo like vomiting, you undergo nausea. Like early morning, I remember back then that early morning I would, before going to college, I would have to take the medication, and then in the morning I would puke or I would vomit, and then I would go to college. Or and then through the day I would keep feeling pretty much in the initial months very tired and not feeling very nice about myself. And and then college life is something that moves very fast, like you have to like It is you have to find your circle, you have to have your friends, you have to, you everything happens in the first few months. Anyone who's, in college life and all, you find your circle, you find your friends pretty much in the first 4 or 5 months, and you find your groups, all of that. But it is only then that I was diagnosed with this illness, and I was going through this. So many of, for example, certain key events where, where we could meet and network with my college classmates and all of that I had to miss. For example, the college festival, I had to miss the college festival in the first year, because I had to stay at home. I was had to take 1 month off, 1.5 months off from college. So naturally, going through all this, you feel just very low, or you just don't like yourself at all. Like you just develop intense dislike about your own self. So that is what had happened back then. And naturally, if what you feel is it is what shows out. If you are feeling low about yourself, it will naturally it will exhibit outside. It was not possible that that what I'm feeling internally, you can just put up the best facade all the time. That's not possible. You can do it for some time, but then naturally, that low confidence level, that low self-esteem, that feeling of not feeling nice about yourself will show up in ways that you don't even know. For example, like talking to classmates, you may come across as someone who's socially awkward, who's not able to hold herself amongst like her peers and things like that. So these kind of things is how it manifested then. But but that was in college. After that, when the second round happened, it was I think when the second round of the illness happened is when I went through like the most difficult phase of like emotional upheaval. It was everything, you experienced everything from whatever you say, extreme sadness. It's not even sadness, honestly, it was depression. So I don't need to like mix words and say it. I was undergoing depression back then. And like because then the grave difficulty in coming to terms with the situation itself, that itself takes time, right? Or feeling that feeling where you get that I would constantly keep feeling that, wow, I'm going through this situation, a sort of situation people only undergo when they grow old. Like I used to feel that, these hospitalization, medications, and all of this, hearing loss, all of this is associated with people who are like, in their older ages. When your parents grow very old, that time is when the illness and all strikes at this level. But when it strikes when you're so young, you are left with like no words also. Like for example, professional ambitions is one thing. When personal ambitions, for example, naturally you feel, your college mates or everyone, people around you, you may get that feeling, wow, they are finding partners, they're having a nice life, they are getting the chance to go out, meet, date, do all of that. But our, I used to think that my head is occupied with a completely whole different set of things. There's just no time to think about all this. So these kind of stuff and all was definitely those years were very, very intense and very difficult.
Right.
No doubt.
And you mentioned that there was a gap of almost 6 to 7 years after you lost your hearing ability overnight. How did you navigate through like communicating? I think you worked also for a year or two in between in that phase. How did you go about all of it?
So I think, like you rightly said, that there's one thing when you lose your hearing, say, like from birth, or generally hearing loss generally happens at birth. Generally the condition is you develop this condition either at birth or say in your initial years. So in your formative years, when you get hearing loss, you still have, you're more supine, you're more nimble to situations when you're younger. You've not seen the world completely, so you can interpret the world the way you want. When you say you lose your hearing at say 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, for example, or at birth or something, you have the ways, you have that nimbleness, you have that flexibility to sort of interpret and adjust to the world the way you want. In my case, I had, like 23 years of like completely normal life. I was, like hearing everything like everyone does. And then suddenly you lose your hearing overnight. So definitely, uh, I remember going through these very intense phases of, uh, initially it was a lot to do with me just accepting the fact that, that I don't have my hearing anymore. And that used to manifest in the initial months in very myriad ways. Like, for example, initially, like I was always that person who would, you would always see me like plugged with headphones all the time. So, I was always that person. I will be plugged with headphones and I'll keep listening to music because I love listening to music. Like, I loved, like listening to music all the time. So there was never a time when there was no music at my place. For studies, if I had to concentrate on my studies, I would play some music and I would start working. I was that sort of a person. So then when imagine, like overnight, you just lost that thing. So I remember once going through this, that I was in my room alone, and then I saw these headphones, and then I saw those headphones, and though I know I could not, like, I won't be able to listen, I just put this and I was like, okay, let me just get the feel of this, like I know this is not for me anymore, but, let me just put this and let me just get the feel of this. And I really felt terrible, of course, that I can't use those headphones anymore. But I was like, I was like, this has been the longest time I have not plugged the headphone in my ears. So let me just take something, let me just put this, and let me just, even if I don't listen to anything, at least let me feel that the headphones are there in my ears. So it would manifest in these ways initially. But then after that, and that also meant that I was not, I had, like completely, I was not, everything again boils down to the same thing, that I used to feel very, very low about myself, to the point that I never had the guts to go out and face people for almost a year or something. I would prefer, that I would go for walks or something. I would go to places where, like lakes or something, all alone, or, with my brother or with my mother or something of that sort. But this thought of, like going for, say, public gatherings, anyone's wedding is happening and things like that, I would be like, no, I cannot go to these places. What am I going to show my face? And, what am I going to say? I can't hear anything. So things like this. And I think, but, you had to, like, ultimately I had to, like, come out, I had to take the first step. And that first step came with the dance. And, like I gave this performance in 2015, where I was not, without being able to hear to any music, I converted the music to numbers, and then I gave this performance. And that sort of gave me some confidence, that okay, I can, like, okay, I can do something. It's not, maybe a lot of the fear is in my mind, and it's time that I can, maybe, it's time to get hold of myself, time to get hold of my mind, and, and just start going out now. So then that's when I started, decided to apply for jobs. Of course, there were a lot of rejections that came along the way in the job scenario, because, like, you are someone with a disability, and there are only certain jobs that you can do, certain jobs that are no longer for you, and things like that. But then I started working in the Economic Times. Back then I worked there for 4 years. And then after that is when, during that period is when I got involved in public health advocacy work. Along with my job, I just felt, that maybe I could sort of, it was just my way, honestly, of just giving back to the cause. So I just felt that, that there's something, I had this intense feeling that I had to do something for TB in whatever way I could. And so this was my way of contributing to that cause. And then naturally, once it started growing, and then due to that work, I got funders, for example, because of the work. My work started getting a lot of recognition. So I had like funders coming out, and then who funded my cochlear implant. So I would communicate, in one line, I would communicate basically with writing back then, because I could not hear anything without the implants. So people would write to me, people would, like, gee, uh, over chats and things like that. Very, very slow form.
Right, Nandita, and I can only imagine how difficult that must have got. This makes me want to ask you, after experiencing a complete hearing loss, when you tried to get back to the job market, how difficult was it for you to really convince employers about one, your meritocracy, and two, your ability to carry out the work despite your disability?
So, after experiencing complete hearing loss, yes, it was a challenge to convince employers uh, that about my meritocracy, or about the fact that I can be a person with a disability and yet I can work. But before that, the first challenge was to convince my own self, and to tell myself that okay, I can do this. I may not be as much ahead as my peers are, but certainly I can do this. And even though I have had a gap, I should not feel ashamed about it and get back into the market. So I think once I convinced myself, then yes, you can put up a slightly more confident front in front of the employers as well. So if you have to convince the employees about your meritocracy, yes, it can be a challenge. It was a challenge because I had a certain gap years, 4 years of gap, and employers don't look at it very kindly when you have such a big gap. It is not seen in your favor, especially we are talking about pre-COVID. At least post-COVID, I think there is a certain understanding, or there has been a certain realization among employers that health issues can be very difficult to deal with, especially very severe health issues. So you have to be more considerate. But pre-COVID, that was not at all the situation. It was an anthema sort of a thing about someone who's dealing with health issues, that oh, she could be a liability, say, for a company. So certainly you have to convince them that yes, you have this gap years, but certainly you have a certain education in your hand, and you have to show that you are earnest to put in that effort. And you have to definitely put in more effort compared to others in your organization to get the same work done because of your disability. So you have to really push yourself, and that is how you have to convince employers.
Right, Nandita. And speaking of liability, what are your thoughts about workplaces being inclusive of persons with disabilities, both visible and invisible disabilities? As you rightly said, most times people with disabilities are seen as a liability. How do you think this narrative or belief will change, and what can we do to change it?
So Indian workplaces have a long way to go, because before they are seen as being inclusive of persons with disabilities. Yes, there is a certain realization, I believe, at least among the bigger corporates, among the top corporates, MNCs, etc. There is seem to be faring better, especially among, say, foreign MNCs who have offices in India. So I have a friend who's working with, say, British Telecom, and he told me that he's had a very favorable time. He has a physical disability, that is, he cannot walk properly, and still he says that his employers in British Telecom have been quite accommodating and understanding. But that may not be the case with, say, so many companies. Maybe even among the top employees could be a bit different, because they are getting more and more global exposure to how scenarios are so much better outside. So I think I think that narrative of PWDs being a liability will change, I think the first step is to just have more representation. That is, more and more PWDs need to be encouraged to enter the workforce. So as you see more people, like us or PWDs around in office, you will get more and more accustomed to dealing with the challenges. Your office systems will get more. You will work after a while to sort of rewire your office systems. So I think the first step is to just see to it that more PWDs are encouraged to enter the workforce, whether it is by offices being putting up very clearly in their recruitments that they are cognizant and they are encouraging of PWDs to join the workforce. And so representation is the very first place, and then after that you have to be representation is the first step, I'll say. And after that, once you are in an office setup, they need to be sort of educated about these things in terms of accommodations that are needed. So maybe have, say, external consultants, hire external consultants, and if possible, I mean, if not, it's not about if possible, you must hire external consultants to give you guidance on how you can make your workplaces more inclusive, disability experts, etc. So they can be a useful step.
Right, of course. Those are really valuable suggestions. And of course, it is high time that Indian workplaces should look at making their workspaces more disabled friendly and inclusive, and to that extent, take advice from disability experts or external consultants. And you also mentioned that you had started your public health advocacy during once you got back to the into the job market. And you started Bolo Didi as a means to advocate for TB patient rights. So, is there a message you would like to share with anyone wanting to start an initiative of similar nature? Since there tends to be a lot of public inertia when you start something, especially a social cause, until the initiative reaches a certain level for people to start believing and supporting your work.
So the message I would like to share with anyone who wants to start something is that if you feel for the cause, and if you if you feel that you have the right skill sets to carry on and do work on the cause, then definitely jump into it. Identify an area that you think within that cause that needs that needs some kind of a solution, and then do find out people who are ready to sort of back your conviction, and definitely say jump into it. It is not going to be easy. Public will not initially care, and also they do have skepticism, and in some cases maybe rightly so, in some cases may not be, but they may have their skepticism about are we backing the right people, etc. So you have to build your what do you see, you have to build your credibility that way. So identify a gap and then don't and work towards it. And if to the public, I would say that do your due diligence, and if you think that the causes and the persons working on that cause is worth backing for, then please do your bit in terms of, say, asking them whether you can volunteer or whether you can give any form of funding, etc. So we just need more people who are sort of aware about this, and that I think is the way forward according to me. So it has to be a two-way process. Hopefully the public will also start getting more aware about backing certain organizations, etc.
Right. And you pursued your master's in public policy from the University of Oxford's Blavatnik School of Government on a fully funded scholarship as a Schevening Weidenfeld Hofmann Trust Scholar. So, what were your challenges really like studying at Oxford during the pandemic as a person with disability? Especially since you managed to not only navigate through it all successfully, but also came out with flying colors.
So yes, when I secured the full scholarship to study at Oxford, yes, it was an exciting, interesting thing, no doubt. But it was also a very unnerving thing because of the fact that I was navigating in a completely different country as a person with a disability, and it can be. So it is not just about Oxford here per se, but it can be with any university in any country. It is not per se about Oxford. You could be in any other college, UCL, King's, or Cambridge, or anything. But yes, there are challenges that come with navigating something in a completely foreign land. So definitely, I had gone to study at Oxford during the pandemic, and because of the hearing disability, a lot of people would wear masks, and that was a big issue for me because I rely on lip reading a lot. So that was a very difficult aspect for me to adjust with. There was, and I still deal with a lot of fear of me lagging behind compared to my peers. So you're surrounded, let's say you're surrounded by, say, really good, extraordinary, or very good people who are competitive, who are equally good or even better than you. Then there's always that fear that, oh, I am lagging behind because of my hearing disability. So these were the two kinds of fears. One was because of the pandemic, masking. So that meant that I was not able to have, or they sort of hindered initially a lot of my interactions with my peers. And the secondly, of course, is the fact that because of that, you do feel that, oh, you're missing out on things. But aside that, I think there's also the other aspect here is that for places abroad are far more acceptable. There is a far more awareness about persons with disabilities and the accommodations that they need. So certainly Oxford had done its bit, which does not happen in universities here. So they had definitely done their bit to help me, whether it is by giving me, say, special instructors, note writers, or even, say, having captions, etc., during Zoom calls or Zoom classes, or things like that. So they did do their bit. Yes, there were things they could have done better, but certainly when I compare with the situation here in many universities, definitely they do their bit, because the general awareness about persons with disability.
Right. And your most recent fiat made global headlines with the patent for Johnson & Johnson's bedaquiline drug being opposed by the Indian Patent Office. Can you share the background behind the filing of the patent opposition to the TB drug? And what is the message you would like to drive to pharmaceutical companies, regulatory bodies, and the government through this history-making win in furtherance of TB advocacy?
So we recently won a patent opposition / patent challenge against the American pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson, and the Indian Patent Office had ruled in our favor and had rejected the application of Johnson & Johnson to extend its patent on a very critical anti-TB drug named bedaquiline. So bedaquiline is a medicine that is used to treat multi-drug resistant TB. It is used for patients who are extremely who are like in the end stages of the disease, and who are having a very difficult time. And this medicine is also seen as a replacement to very harsh injectables that patients are supposed to take. So even in my case, even I had also taken injections for TB, and these injections had caused me loss of hearing. And so a lot of patients who are undergoing very severe TB treatment and stuff, they are given injectables, and bedaquiline is seen as an oral, a very better, a more safer oral alternative to the TB, to the injectables that are there. And so so the company was trying to extend its patent from 2023 to 2027 through a strategy that is called as evergreening.
wherein they make like small tweaks to the compound, and then they say that they have discovered something new. And so that is what we had opposed, saying that this is a very critical drug that needs to reach more number of patients. So it is important that other manufacturers are able to enter into the market, and other generic manufacturers, especially since India has a strong generic manufacturing industry for pharmaceuticals. So we said that our argument was that generic manufacturers should be allowed, good generic manufacturers, strong generic manufacturers should be allowed, so that the access improves and even the price of the medicine drops. So that was the argument, and we won at the Indian Patent Office, and this was very widely covered in the press about the fact that J&J's application was rejected, and patent opposition filed by two TB survivors. We won it. So yeah, and I think to the message to pharmaceutical companies and everyone, I think, is that that pharmaceutical companies are involved in making important drugs. So I understand that there's a lot of money that goes into it. There is a lot of money that is plowed into the R&D for the research and development. It is very I understand that, and and that it needs to be, say, recouped through patents. But you do have a patent life of, say, a certain number of years, say 20 years or something. I think after that, when it's a public good, when it's a good that is in the domain of health, it is important that it is available to a wider number of people after the patent period finishes.
This is such amazing work that you have spearheaded, something that will go down in history for all times to come. And is there a piece of advice you would like to share with someone going through trying times, or someone living with life-altering realities for the rest of their lives, due to a medical condition or loss of their loved ones or something similar, as a concluding statement on the podcast?
When life pushes you over, you ought to push back harder.
And that's a wrap with Nandita Venkatesan on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed speaking to Nandita on her many achievements and the many roadblocks that she has had to encounter. And if you like this episode and the work that we do on the podcast, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And follow us on Instagram at The Speak Synergy, where I post snippets of the podcast. And sharing this initiative will really help the channel go a long way and reach a wider audience, and especially those who need it the most while navigating through trying times. Thank you so much, and see you soon.